let's get started with the presentation. I want to bring in Tom Diliberti. He's Energy Cap's Senior Manager of Energy and Sustainability, and he'll get us started with the presentation. So Tom, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that, Deborah. And welcome to everybody joining the webinar today. I'm going to be our master of ceremonies or lead us through a panel discussion, but I wanted to start by just talking about the agenda. In today's webinar, I want to allow the people that are going to be speaking to do introductions of themselves, and then I'm going to take over control, and I want to take us through a brief history of water distribution and forecasted water rates. I thought that might be a nice way to level set our conversation today and begin the conversation moving forward so that we all have a common understanding. A majority of today's webinar is going to be a panel discussion, and like many of these webinars, we'll finish with a question and answer. So, as far as introduction goes, let me start with myself. So I am a senior manager for energy and sustainability at Energy Cap, and a little bit about my history. I'm an educator to my core. I started my professional career as an educator more than 30 years ago, but I spent the last 20 years of my life working in the energy industry, supporting clients from coast to coast, many K-12 school districts, public universities, and different institutions with their energy conservation measures. So I have a lot of experience, and I really get excited about energy conservation and trying to help others solve their problems. So that's a little bit about me. Tim, let me throw it over to you. Could you tell us a little about you?
Sure, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm the utilities analyst for Drury Hotels. Drury Hotels, a little bit about Drury. We're in 27 states now with about 150 hotels, growing by 3 to 5 hotels per year. Started in 1973 by the Drury family, who had been farmers and plaster contractors, and they were building some hotels and thought, you know what, it might be better to operate hotels rather than build them. So they got into the hotel business, and we're still 100% family owned. We have some new builds. Most of the 3 to 5 that we add every year are new builds, and then we've also got a lot of historic restorations down in the cities, some downtown areas, San Antonio, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, many others. So a little about myself. I've been in the utility industry 36 years. The first 32 were with a natural gas distribution company here in the Midwest. And in the past 4 years, I've been here at Drury overseeing the utility billing and any questions that come up regarding utilities.
Eric, would you mind jumping in and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Eric Reinhold. I'm the Director of Administration here at the University of Arizona, working in the University Facility Services Department. The University of Arizona has over 15, we're responsible for 15 million square feet. We have 308 buildings on campus, 412 buildings off campus in the surrounding area, as well as 3 central power plants. There's 700 employees in our department. And we process a little bit over, we have 1,000 of our own meters on campus reading all the types of commodities, as well as we process over, we have 1 facilities analyst that processes over 1,000 invoices a month for all of our utilities. And we have 8 wells on property, and we actually produce about 90% of our own water.
Wow. Awesome. And Dylan, how about you? Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm an account executive over at Energy Cap. My name is Dylan Reedy. While I don't have any cool stories like Tim and Eric today, they both utilize the Energy Cap platform. So if any questions come up about the software that they're utilizing, I'm here to help.
Awesome. So as I indicated a minute ago with the agenda, where I wanted to start today was a brief history of water distribution in the U.S. I did some research in preparation for today's webinar, and I found some interesting things that I wanted to share. So starting back in the 1600s, and think about this was technically before we became a country, in the colonial era, settlements relied on wells, rain barrels, and local streams. There was very little formal infrastructure. In the 1800s, growing cities began building rudimentary water systems with wooden pipes, aqueducts, and public fountains. You might be interested to learn that Philadelphia in 1801 developed one of the first major municipal water systems using steam pumps and reservoirs. Cast iron pipes and gravity-fed systems became common in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And when those systems were put in, They were put in with a life cycle or life expectation of 75 to 100 years. And I just want to pause on that point for a second, just so you can digest that. So what we're saying here is around 1900, systems started to get installed around the country that had an expected life cycle of 75 to 100 years. So fast forward where we are now, more than 100 years later, that's the reason for the webinar today and why water is such a hot topic of discussion. So wastewater issues grew with the city. So most sewage went untreated into rivers. So around 1900, as these systems were being installed, we had problems with getting rid of the water with the wastewater systems. And so that precipitated getting chlorination and filtration systems installed in order to reduce the possibility of having waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid. So in the 1930s to the 1960s, New Deal programs funded large-scale projects like the Hoover Dam. You might remember the Hoover Dam was completed in 1936. So the infrastructure supported agriculture, industry, and rapidly expanding suburbs. When we got to the 1970s and the 1990s, there was some legislation that was passed which mandated pollution control and drinking water standards. Huge federal investments upgraded sewage treatment plants and regulated industrial discharge. Water quality became a national priority. Presently, much of the U.S. water system, as I've said, is 75 to 100 years old, leading to leaks, breaks, and contamination risks all over. I learned just the other day a very profound figure that there are anticipated to be 240,000 water leaks annually in the United States. So in the systems that feed all of our water systems, all the pipes, there are also 2.2 million miles of pipe under the ground. And once again, it's 75 to 100 years old. Other challenges is there's droughts and floods are stressing our existing systems. Smart meters, water recycling, and desalination are being developed, but those systems aren't fully operational yet, or they're not deployed in major numbers. And there's growing attention about underserved communities lacking safe, affordable water. So let's talk a little bit about the water forecast. So billions of dollars in upgrades are required to repair or replace pipelines, treatment plants, and pumping systems. These costs are going to most likely be passed on to taxpayers. New regulations are pushing utilities to invest in advanced treatment technologies. Compliance costs are significant and ongoing, especially for smaller underfunded systems. Droughts, floods, extreme weather events are, again, stressing these systems. And utilities are spending more on resilience, conservation, and supply diversification. You might find this fact pretty interesting that the federal investment in water infrastructure has declined from 60% in the 1970s to less than 10% today. This leaves local utilities in a pickle to find the funding in order to drive these changes. So what's the trend? What do we expect to have happen in the future? Well, if we look at the past, over the last 5 years, typical U.S. households, the water and sewer bills have risen by 24%, or roughly 4 to 5% annually. That same trend is predicted for the next 20 years, and some people predict it's even going to be bigger than that, where those increases are expected to be much more significant. What you should expect in the next 20 years, though, is your water bills are very likely going to double from what they are today. And down here in the bottom of this slide, talking about the affordability concerns, this creates potentially a very significant problem for people that are live in communities as far as affordability thresholds. Is will everyday people be able to afford their water? And so that's obviously a major concern, that people get what they need. So with that as a backdrop, and hopefully that doesn't sound all too dismal, just simply a reflection of where we're at and maybe the motivation to conserve and make changes, I wanted to bring in our panel and ask questions and start to dissect this issue, and hopefully provide some ideas, some thoughts on how we can make this better, and share the successes that Eric and Tim have had at their particular organizations. So let's start with this. So Tim, let me start with you. And what's been happening with water and sewer rates in your area? And have you found the relationships with your vendors to be helpful?
So yeah, we, as I mentioned earlier, we're in 27 different states. So our area is pretty big. Goes everywhere from Arizona to Florida and up to Pennsylvania and Minnesota. So anyway, in those areas, you can imagine there's a lot of variation there. Typically, we'll see, 2 to 4% increases each year for water and sewer. Sometimes it's zero. Sometimes it's 30%, depending on if a certain municipality has ignored the problem for so long that they've let it grow and finally had to do something drastic to bring their water system up to where it needed to be, or their sewage system up to where it needed to be. These people most of these bills that we get are from municipalities for water and sewer. So it's elected officials who are, putting people in charge of that, and elected officials have to be elected. So they sometimes have lower increases than what should be. And there's the time of reckoning whenever those need to be caught up. But overall, instead of, the giant increases, we typically see the 2 to 4% range. And our vendor relationships helpful? Yes, they are, because you're dealing with those, again, with the municipalities. So the person that you're dealing with on the phone in the water area, public works area, they might be sitting right next to the mayor or the building inspector or someone else of importance there in the city. So you want to maintain a good relationship with the cities, or if it's not even that, you just want to maintain a good relationship because that person you're dealing with on the other end of the line is a potential guest of ours, being that we're a hotel chain. So we always want to maintain good relationships, and also quicker resolution of issues. If you're not a very nice person on your end of the line and don't have a good relationship, they might drag their feet on fixing up a billing matter that might pop up, or drag their feet on getting a technician out if you think that you're being overbilled or something, if there's an issue with the meter. So yes, vendor relationships are very important.
Awesome. Eric, what are your thoughts? Tell us about the rates in your area, and what's been your experience with vendors?
So pretty much between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 27, the city of Tucson has put a 5.5% increase year over year. So in that span, we'll see a 22% increase in the cost of water and sewer in the city of Tucson. So that's a pretty significant increase. And on top of that, living in Arizona, living in the desert, and living where water is really supplied off of the Colorado River, I think everybody knows the issues that are going on there with the 7 states fighting for that water. That's an area for us to be aware of and concerned. So that's one of those things. And then when we also think about the relationships with the municipalities, they are important. However, they are a municipality, and at times it's difficult to find that point person, as opposed to when we're working with other utility providers, when we actually have assigned managers to our accounts. So
Sure.
We struggle with that here.
Yeah. So Eric, kind of a corollary to the question I've asked in terms of the vendors, and it goes with rates or incentives. Have you had the opportunity to take advantage of some of the rebates and incentives through the local utility company?
Yes, we have an energy management team that is constantly looking at any abilities that we can do to take care of any rebates in terms of reducing water restrictions, different faucets, different head gaskets. It's something that I'm not fully aware of, but they are dealing with it on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, I wonder, in your situation with spanning over many states, have you been able to do that? It's probably much more difficult when you have hotels in many different states and working with many different vendors. How about any success getting rebates and incentives?
Well, yeah, we have a building group that remodels our hotels every 7 to 10 years. They'll go in and do a complete remodel, and that building team would be the ones that would go in and search out any rebates or incentives that would be available for water, sewer, electric, gas, all of those. They would take a look at that at each time that hotel is remodeled, and they look at that as well whenever those hotels are built.
That's great. Something that I'd offer everybody, just from my experience, and this is not necessarily common knowledge, I don't think, but many water companies around the country will forgive an event if you have a leak or a problem. And so just know that it might be something that you take advantage of, is like I say, with these utility companies, where they recognize that there are going to be problems with the systems, and they try to work with you when you have an event take place. So if you weren't aware of that and you work in this environment, know that you can many times go to your vendor and get forgiveness. So, Tim, let me come back to you. What challenges are you facing at your organization regarding water and sewer?
As As far as some of the challenges we face, what we want to do is we want to, control our usage as far as, we want to be sensible in the amount of water we use and we don't want to overuse. But we as a hotel chain have guests that expect a certain level of water availability when they're staying at our hotels. So, we can find ways to reduce water usage, low flow shower heads and aeration systems and whatnot. But at the same point, we need to balance that challenge of keeping guest satisfaction up while, coming up with some ways to conserve water that, that are reasonable and don't impact their stay while they're there. Because there's some stories that I've heard from people that have stayed at some of the hotels out on the West Coast of, water barely dripping out of the shower whenever they get in there to take a shower. And we don't want to be that. We don't want to deal with that. So that's one of the challenges that we face.
Absolutely. I can see that. I'm a frequent hotel renter, and I can tell you, those things stick out. If things aren't quite right in the room, you remember those things. So it's definitely, I can understand being a huge priority in the actions that you and your colleagues take day in and day out. Eric, what about you? What challenges are you facing with your organization regarding water and sewer?
I think this is a good one just to go into one of the stories that we were talking about earlier. When we think about our challenges, and it can come with aging infrastructure on our municipality's part or the technology. Back in 2000 and September of 2023, we had a water bill where we received, ended up being like $91,000 for a meter that normally ran at about $700. Now, our municipality has a 15-day turnaround on invoices, and we have, as I mentioned, one utility finance analyst that goes ahead and processes it all. So our goal is always to process the invoices immediately and then go back and review. This is going back in 2023. And what had happened was the city's meters went down, and they determined that they were going to go back and look at November of 22's usage, so compare month over month. Well, in November of 22, our wells were down. And so we were not producing our own water. So we were using the city of Tucson's water, but we were not in 2023, we were not. And so because their systems failed, they ended up getting a bill, and we billed them they billed us $91,000, and we paid it. We went back and eventually got that money, having to go through our Office of General Counsel to fight with them to not give them an advance. But the moral of the story is if we didn't have a system, and we had the system in place because we had our own meters on the water intake coming from the city of Tucson. So we were able to go back in January, look at our numbers, compared it to theirs, and say, there's something wrong here. And then we got them to admit, yes, there was something wrong. We used false data, and we're able to. And I think that's a very important or message to get across is the meter reading is not always accurate, and figuring out ways to protect that meter reading is important. And the university has a team of 4 meter readers that are constantly out there looking at our information.
Yeah. Eric, in your situation working on a campus, I'd be curious to know, where do you see your biggest water loads in the buildings? Is it with irrigation, refrigeration, restrooms? Have you guys been able to kind of dissect the water use that's happening on campus, since it's contained? Tim's World is kind of spread out all over everywhere, but what about on the campus there?
Well, you have to think we have like 9,000 students living on campus. And so during those 7 to 8 months that they're here, the biggest usage is in the dorms, and then it goes out to the buildings. We recently have built a 1 million a 1 million gallon water collection barrel we have our monsoon system set, and we use that to primarily deal with the water reclamation. But that's our strength there. And the biggest water usage is our cooling, because chilled water. That's how we cool all of our buildings.
Yeah, excellent.
And I'm going to give a big shout out to Mike Hoffman, who's listening right now, because he just pinged me on that one.
As well, you should. I know he works very aggressively to save the university energy and money. So that's great.
Yes.
Tim, let me throw it back to you. What are the most common operational failures that you've seen? Are you running into issues with irrigation? Is it Is it valve stuck open in your world with cooling towers? Where is the where are the biggest failures you're finding?
The biggest failures that we found are dealing with irrigation issues or anything with a solenoid valve. If there's a water softener, ice machine, those type of things, they can all of a sudden a solenoid valve, I guess, opens and closes and allows water to flow or not flow. If the solenoid valve sticks in the open position, a water softener can just all of a sudden keep dumping water down the drain continuously. Ice machine can just let water through continuously. So those types of things. And then the damaged sprinkler heads whenever, a car doesn't park well and gets up into the yard or cuts a turn sharp and too sharp and, something happens there where they bust a sprinkler head and it just starts draining down the drain without anybody noticing for a while. And then, the cooling towers and boiler issues, those are things that are above my skill level as far as knowing what all's happened with them, but sometimes things can go wrong there too.
Sure. And so let me give you a chance to talk a little bit about the data. How important has it been to have accurate data for solving these problems, Tim?
Accurate data is very important because it allows for certain comparisons that help us to see that there's an issue. If we don't have accurate data, it's sort of like a garbage in, garbage out scenario where if you put garbage into your energy tracking system, energy cap in this case, then your comparisons building to building or one building compared to the same building past use, one building compared to the same building past expense, those numbers wouldn't make any sense. So it's very important that accurate data is there so that the information that we use out of that system is accurate and helps us track down problems.
Absolutely. I can see the value of that. I know Eric is having a little bit of trouble with his audio. I'm just checking in. Eric, are you able to respond or are you still having some snags with the audio?
I'm back now. Is it working?
Yeah, we got you. So I just want to, I know in preparation for the webinar, we talked a little bit about the accuracy of data. I just want to give you a chance to talk about, in your world, how important has it been to have accurate data for solving the problems?
Well, if we don't know what's going on in all of our buildings, we're unable to make proper changes. When we look back to I'll just go back, we recently converted over to Energy Cap, and I have another story going back to it, which really helped us. We had an outlying property whose utility bill or water bill spiked specifically once again. And this time what we were able to do is we noticed it within the day we got the invoice, and we were able to contact that provider. And that provider, what they were able to do is they were able to put our bill on hold. And when it came down to it is they had misread it. They had added a 1 to the end of the meter number, which the difference would have been $1,000 versus $15,000 in that bill. And so using that, we were able to control it. So when we have accurate data, we're able to really look into our systems and figure out where we have struggles. Another one, you have the cooling tower or our chilled water. We had one of our buildings where it wasn't under facilities management control at the time. They had a leak, and what they were doing is they were taking the leak from our chilled water system and they were putting it directly into the drain. And so was taking the water out of our chilled water system, which we spent tons of time cooling and expenses to cool, and it was just literally going down the drain. We were able to catch that relatively quickly because of the systems that we have in place and understanding where the water loss is.
Wow, that's amazing. Another number I wanted to leave people with today, just to make sure it gets said, is statistics show right now that there are 6 billion gallons of water wasted through water leaks every single day in the United States. So just think about that for a second. 6 billion gallons of water wasted every single day through little things like that. It's really, really remarkable. All right. Tim, what about, tell us about the tools and flags that you used to prevent costly overcharges. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your experience with Energy Cap.
Sure, yeah. Energy Cap offers flags and tools that help identify potential issues. Flags are sort of the front end, I consider the front end. check where if a bill gets into our system and for some reason it looks too high, too low, as far as dollars or use, the bill is flagged as it immediately goes into the Energy Cap system. So as you have opportunity, which is hopefully every day, to review those flags, you can put a stop to a bill so that something doesn't occur, like, Tom or Eric mentioned earlier, paying that $91,000 bill as it arrived. Hopefully you can put the brakes on something like that because the flags can be immediate. And there's some adjustments you can make on sensitivity of the flags, where if you want to be notified of highly different amounts, and it'll do that, or if you wanted it a little tighter, see fewer ones, you can do that. That seems all adjustable. Tom probably knows all about that. And then dashboards and reports are another feature of Energy Cap. I have a few of my favorite reports, and Tom gave a great presentation once on dashboards. Those are, comparing whatever you really want, use per square foot of your building, unit cost. Those are very useful measures that you can use to detect overcharges or building problems. And then there's other reports that just help out as far as just knowing if your bill has arrived when it should arrive, so that you're not, late fees aren't tacked onto your bill unnecessarily. If the bill didn't show up and your system's not going to notify you otherwise, Energy Cap can let you know through some of the reports that are available. So not only can you avoid, some late fees, but worst case scenario, you can avoid having your service disconnected as a surprise if the utility company doesn't do a good job of sending you warning letters or whatnot before that would occur. So it's been very useful in tools, flags, reporting items available through Energy Cap. They're very good.
Yeah. Eric, what about your perspective on the same question? What about the tools and flags either that you use or maybe your team uses to try to catch things? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Exactly how he explained it. I mean, we use it on a regular basis as invoices are coming in. It's being compared to previous months and years, and it's putting that red flag out there. Something that was a very manual process has now become an automated process, which has really helped us expedite our analysis and understanding.
That's great. That is really awesome. The next question I had, and I think, Eric, we've already heard your biggest win with the $91,000 you were kind of talking about and how successful that was. So, Tim, I want to throw this over to you. What about your biggest win? And I know you shared a story in preparation for this call about a win that I thought you might want to share with everybody on the call today.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure which one you're referring to exactly, Tom, but there was one that we had about 21,000 that we received as a leak allowance. Tom mentioned earlier in the call that it's worth checking with the utility company if you did have a leak that occurred to see if you can get money back for that if you've already paid it, which in many cases, if it's registered on the meter and it was used, you better pay that bill. But we had a hotel that had a leak. It was at the entrance to the building, but it was underground. And so the meter, of course, was outside the building, probably about 10, 12 foot away from the building. And the leak was before it went into the building. So it was in that intermediate area there. So the hotel itself wasn't experiencing any leaking, no dampness in the basement or anything like that. But, if this thing would have kept going for years, it probably would have created some sort of sinkhole. But anyway, we did pursue a leak allowance there, and we got $21,000 back from that utility company or that municipality due to that. And that was a huge win for us. And, we detected that through some of the Energy Cap tools. It was immediately identified through some Energy Cap tools. It wasn't one of those, things that showed up later. It's one of those things that's flagged immediately and you're right on it. But, that was probably one of our biggest wins that we've had. But we've had a number of wins, systems that have, like irrigation system issues that have carried on for longer than they should. Just being able to see that that's out there and it's still continuing, and to hammer on that management team that's out there that, hey, even though you haven't found it, there's something happening here that's needing to be addressed. So that's some of our big wins.
That's great, Tim. Eric, what about you? Do you have another story to tell? Or I know you shared your story about the 91,000. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
I mean, those are just some. I mean, when we think about it, just in constant, when you're able to find even the single toilet that's been leaking in a dorm for 3 months when it's closed, if you're able to catch that because you're noticing water flow when it shouldn't be happening, is a big savings. And having that information immediately is really important.
Yeah. Let me throw out another number that people might log in the back of their heads just so you know, but this is crude and it's different all around the country, but I like to approximate costs for people so that they have an idea what the impact is. In roughly a gallon of water costs about a third of a penny. So 3 gallons of water would cost about a penny. And so if you have a toilet valve that's stuck, that's running for hours or long periods of time, I realize a penny doesn't seem like a lot, but if it's happening every 3 gallons and all those gallons are going right down the toilet, you can see how it can begin to become very costly very quickly.
And another thing,
Tim,
Tom,
I
in
wanted to
relation
come
to
back to you because I was fishing for a story about a pool. I wanted to give you a chance to share the story about one of your pools because I thought that would be fun for the people to learn about your experience with the pool.
Yeah, it was another situation where whenever you compare property to property and you're seeing higher use at one compared to another, you keep probing and seeing why, or asking the question, why is your hotel using this much compared to other hotels or other properties? And especially if they're very similar, and you can send data to support your case, which I usually do, just because it's like I could be wrong, so I want to present the manager of that property with data that allows them to compare their properties to some others that they probably have visited at times during their career. And so I was doing that for this one property, and they hadn't turned anything up for a couple months, and I had noticed I'm also on an email chain for utility issues, and I had noticed that they had some swimming pool problems from time to time, where they would close their swimming pool. Basically, you'd get a notice saying, set this out on the website saying that the pool's not available for guests, so that a guest that's checking in can see maybe the pool's not available for an hour or two while they're doing something in that area. Well, I was seeing that a little more often on this one hotel that I had the issue that was showing up on. So finally, I was communicating back and forth and found out they were, whenever the pool would get a little bit cloudy, rather than doing the chemical balancing, they'd drain it and then they'd refill it. It's like, face plant. It's like, oh no, what have you fallen into habit-wise as far as for doing that? Because you're paying a lot for that water that you're bringing in, and you're also paying to get that water treated at the sewer treatment facility as well. So double-edged sword, and so they quickly amended their ways, and they were sorry that they had done that and all was well soon afterwards. So it's been very smooth since then.
That's great. I always tell people there's no value in looking in the rearview mirror. You can't fix those things from the past, but learn from it and then just try to do better in the future. The other number that I like to throw out to people, if it's helpful, just in understanding volumes of water, the assumption is we've all been in a high school natatorium or pool area. A typical high school pool has about 200 to 250,000 gallons of water. So if you want to get a sense of how much water is in a pool like that, like I say, it's somewhere between 200 and 250,000 gallons of water.
Fortunately, ours weren't that.
Yeah. I had one last question, Eric and Tim, for you, and then we're going to hand it off to Dylan. So, Eric, again, I think you've been fighting your audio a little bit. Let's start with you and see, can you make any recommendations or suggestions on best practices for benchmarking your equipment upgrades?
Well, I mean, we have buildings going back. Hopefully it sounds going well better now. Yeah. We have buildings going back to the late 1800s, and so we're constantly looking at our systems and trying to update them. But the big important thing that we've had is being able to meter these buildings as well, so that we're able to find problems when we have them. It's all about measurement and verification, measuring the items, making sure that it's working, and constantly just being on the numbers. And that's what our metering team, their focus is.
Awesome. And Tim, what about you? Any last minute thoughts?
Well, as far as like benchmarking and that, we can take a look at our reports regularly, our dashboards regularly, as far as just to make sure that nothing's gone haywire with one of our buildings or with one of the utility providers. And then also, some of our buildings are historic renovations. We've got, a Federal Reserve building up in Pittsburgh. It's an older building. It's a beautiful building with, everything that would have come with a Federal Reserve building. But, those have older systems in there. So as those properties, and as any property in our property list comes up for renovation, we need to reassess the technology and that's in place at the time of the renovation to see if some improvements can be made, because technological innovations do come along and improvements can be made in the water usage area, or electric, changing out your lights for pin lights, changing them out to LEDs and that. So that's some of the things that we do is we look especially during renovation time and make sure that we have that capital set aside. We plan for the future so that whenever it's time for a renovation, that we can do the things that cause best practices as far as use is concerned.
Fantastic. Eric, Tim, thank you both. I don't want to let you go yet because I know we're going to go through question and answers, but I did want to take a minute to hand it off to Dylan and have Dylan showcase a little bit about some of those benchmarking tools and tools that are within Energy Cap that might be advantageous for people to see. So Dylan, hopefully you're still out there in the ether. Are you able to jump in and take over?
Yeah, I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, just fine. Thank you.
Cool. So some of the tools that Tim and Eric have been using is Energy Cap. And Energy Cap is a software platform that essentially creates a database of your energy data. So I'm talking about interval data from a building management system or sub-meters, or even from a utility provider's website, if they have that available. And then utility bills themselves. And so what we'll do is we'll gather that information. Either you guys are importing the data into the system or we're helping you get it. And from there, we're going to audit it to make sure it's as accurate as possible. And I'll jump into the audits a little bit more in a second. But essentially, we're trying to give you quality data that you can rely on, so that when you see some sort of error, some sort of anomaly, some sort of waste, like higher than usual water consumption, you can say, hey, this is likely correct, and this is something that we have to explore. Then when you guys have resolved those issues, you can put them into reports, dashboards, whatever you need to show stakeholders, to show your community, to show the public how much you've decreased your annual energy spend or your annual energy usage. So in a nutshell, that's what Energy Cap does. It can collect data, it can audit it for accuracy, and then it can put it into the reports that you guys need for communication purposes. Now, Tom, do I have control over the slide? Can I click next, or are you?
I'll bump you. Whoops, I took you too far, I think. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, yep, you do. Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. So essentially, there's two types of things that Energy Cap's audits are looking for. Number one are billing errors, right? Is there a missing bill? Is there a rate schedule mismatch? Are there overlapping statement dates? We're looking at the integrity of the utility invoice, right? We want to make sure that that is as accurate as it can possibly be, right? Because you can imagine if something's wrong with the invoice itself, it's going to throw off those consumption and those cost metrics, which are going to then hurt our reports. The next thing that we're looking at are energy anomalies, right? So if we get a flag for an energy anomaly related to water, we can be pretty confident that there's maybe some sort of error or some sort of issue with the water itself, like perhaps there's a leak, right? So it's going to flag the consumption metrics, the demand metrics from either utility bills or interval data sets coming from submeters, coming from building management systems, coming from that utility provider's website, right? So those are kind of the two quality control mechanisms in the platform. We're looking at consumption and demand from electricity, natural gas, water, and then we're looking at potential billing errors, the actual integrity of the invoice. And solving for those give us good, accurate, reliable data that we can use to make decisions on our energy portfolio. Let me click into the next one here. Now, something that's come up a lot today are rates and water, specifically water rates. This example here is of electricity rates in the platform, but imagine we're doing this for water as well. So all your rate schedules will be stored in the platform. And when they're stored in the platform, you can do things like create reports, create power views or dashboards that will tell you what meters are on what rates, what utility providers are offering those rates for those particular meters. And it will also catch when a rate has spiked, right? Like what we're seeing right now in the United States is that water rates across the board seem to be going up 20 to 25%, like Tom, Tim, and Eric have been talking about. And so that's one of the potential billing errors that the platform can flag is a rate schedule mismatch. My water rates have gone up. I wasn't aware of it. What's contributing to this? So we're storing that type of information for reporting as well. And that information can usually be gained from or usually collected from a utility invoice. You can also put it into the platform manually if you need to. And then once the data has gone through our audits, through our quality control, you can start to visualize it in different graphs and different reports. This first one here, this is a savings trend chart, right? You have potentially put in new water infrastructure or new electricity infrastructure, and you're trying to measure the success of that project. EnergyCap will measure the success of that project based off of IPMVP, option B or C industry standard methodologies to show you how much costs were avoided by taking on a certain project. Then for more real-time analysis, when we're working with interval data, we can start to understand the fluctuations in demand or consumption throughout the course of the day. So if we see random green cells, dark green cells on this heat map chart here, if you guys can see this, this might be a little bit too small. That's showing us that this meter is in use and it may be in use off a schedule. And if it's in use off a schedule, we may be dealing with water anomalies or electricity anomalies. So not only do I check for these things, but the graphs, the charts that help you analyze further if there's errors in your portfolio or there's anomalies or issues in your portfolio that need extra attention. And to be honest, I messed up here. So I had a great chart for water. I put in electricity. I was focused on electricity rates going up, and I didn't put in the proper chart for water rates going up. So what I did here was I tried to find across the board how much are rates increasing. And for electricity, across the board in the United States, it's going up about 9%. So you can imagine in places like perhaps California, they're going up a lot higher than 10% or 9%. In other areas, they may only be going up like Tim was talking about, they may only be going up 3 to 4%. Now, what's interesting, and I wish I had this graph for you guys, but when you look at water across the board in US cities, it's going up 20 to 25%, right? So you can imagine in certain cases, is maybe in Arizona with data centers, it's even going up higher than 20%. I don't know, I would have to look at the data. Point is, utility rates are going up across the board within the United States. So as rates are going up, tools like EnergyCap that helps you audit your data sets, analyze your data sets, can help you actually still decrease your annual energy spend, even though water and electricity is becoming more expensive. A little bit of validation there is we did some research on our own customer base, trying to determine how much money they're saving using the platform. And we split it up into kind of two categories. One is ROI from a cost perspective, how much of our customer savings off their annual energy spend. And then number two was how much time are they saving by using a platform like Energy Cap? Now I'm looking at this, and this is mostly just from an ROI perspective on savings off your annual energy spend. So let me speak to that. About 52% or a majority of the customers that we surveyed saved upwards of 10% off their annual energy spend in less than 3 years. Now you can imagine, I know a lot of you guys on this call tuning in probably have really high annual energy spends. So saving about 10% off of that over the course of 2 to 3 years can really do, or can really be valuable for your organizations. And what I've seen some customers do, some people do, is reinvest that savings into more energy projects and create a revolving fund where they can continue to invest in their infrastructure, their water infrastructure, their electricity infrastructure to generate more savings. And I believe that's my last slide. Let me see if I got one more. This is cool. So you guys can use these QR codes, and hopefully we can send this out to you after the call. If not, maybe take a screenshot of this now, where we have pocket guides where you can take data that you guys are using, or, for customers of ours that are also tuning in, you can take your Energy Cap data and you can plug in these prompts into a tool like ChatGPT to determine the best strategies that you can employ in your portfolio to continue saving money. Now, Energy Cap doesn't have AI built into it, but the idea is if you have quality data and you use these prompts that we put in these pocket guides, it can help you develop pretty solid, concrete strategies on continuing to reduce your annual energy spend. And I believe that's the end of this for me. So I'm going to pass this back over to Deborah.
Perfect. Thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, Dylan, thank you. And everybody, thank you. It was really great having this mix of perspectives and expertise and experience. So thank you all for sharing today. And what a perfect segue into our first question, because it's something I want to get everybody's perspective on. What is the number one point you would express when trying to get higher executives on board regarding implementing Energy Cap? Getting that internal buy-in, especially for someone where they have competing priorities, is a really big issue that we hear about. So, Tom, let me start with you on this one.
Yeah, Deborah, it's a great question. What's interesting with my experiences is what financial people and CEOs, leaders of organizations want to hear is they want a high ROI, right? They want a quick ROI. They want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth. And that is absolutely going to happen with Energy Cap. But the other thing that's really neat about Energy Cap is it seems to be the first domino that falls in a series of dominoes where when you start to bring the data into one spot and get people talking and motivated for energy conservation, a lot of other good things happen within the organization. And I think that's a main talking point I'd have with leadership. It's like, this is just the beginning of a process. Yes, we will get a return on investment, but we're also going to become more efficient over time.
Okay, Eric, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I can. When looking at this and going through it with our directors, it was more about us wanting more information and how could we get that information easier. And Energy Cap was a model or area that we could use, tool that we could use to allow us to see the information easier. When we were limited within our staffing, we were unable to catch things as quickly as we would like to. This allows us to see information quicker.
Okay, and Tim.
I would say one of the things from an executive standpoint that might ring a bell with some of the executives would be what percentage of the overall budget utilities are in compared to other categories. I mean, with us, of course, employee expense is going to be up there, and that's probably the case with most businesses. But other than that, utility expenses, they definitely rank in the top 4 as far as we're concerned, maybe even top 3. So if you can pay close attention to that expense, being that it's such a high expense, the opportunity for savings is pretty high there as well. And Energy Cap, in our instance, has given us that tool to look for savings on that budgeted or actual spend for utility.
Savings is a good word to have when talking to upper management, for sure. And
Yeah.
Dylan, let's end this one with you.
Deborah, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. It's the number one point you would express when trying to get higher executives on board regarding implementing energy cap. How do you talk to senior management?
It's a great question. You know, from a sales perspective, if that's valuable to anyone, I think folks want to know the value that they're getting from a software, and are you solving problems for them, and what are the problems? And I think that changes on a case-by-case basis. So if I was trying to find a common thread between all the people that I've talked to, what gets stakeholders engaged is things like ROI, like I was talking about earlier, both from a cost perspective, but then also from a time savings perspective, right? Can I take some manual data entry burdens away from my team so that they can be more effective and maybe hit some of their KPIs that they haven't been able to because they've been so bogged down in the data itself, collecting it and making sure it's accurate, and haven't had the time to actually dive into saving the organization money from an annual energy spend perspective, but then also consumption as well to hit some of their KPIs and targets.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, everybody. That was helpful. Our next question, what are some common issues around water efficiency that are first on the checklist to address when coming across high water use? I know you talked about some of this, but Tom, is there anything you want to focus on here?
You know what, I would, my word of advice or my suggestion to people is chase down the big energy or water consumers first. You're always going to have the opportunity with shower heads and toilets and things within buildings that are consuming water that can be retrofitted or changed or adjusted in order to reduce water flow. But there are usually within an organization just a couple really big things that consume a lot of water. Number one, probably being irrigation for many organizations. Another one could be cooling towers, or if you have water-cooled refrigeration units, all of these consume huge amounts of water. And so if I was going to teach or educate, explain to somebody, I would look at all those things first, make sure all of those things are operating properly, and then work backwards. Do the big stuff, working towards the small stuff, but don't ignore anything. And always be in your buildings, be out in your fields, just make observations. Boy, observations make such a world of difference if you drive around or walk through your buildings in order to give you direction on where the best opportunities are.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And we're almost at the top of the hour. Let's sneak one more question in. What is the future of water reuse in this country? Oh, you know something? I'm sorry. My bad. Let me go to a different one. I want to end on something else. It seems that water costs have significantly risen. We've talked about that a little bit, especially over the last year. Are there any tips or tricks for predicting water or sewer costs for the budgets? Budgets are always an issue. And what would you advise for the coming year? Dylan, let me go to you for that, and then we'll end with Tom.
You know, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question. I'm more so curious in Eric and Tim's perspective on it, and Tom as well. With the last couple of minutes, why don't we give it over to them to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got something on that. Something that I do each year whenever budgeting time comes around, which it is sort of a pain because we're in 27 different states and several municipalities within those states, is just do Google searches. Basically, get on the web and type in whatever city you're interested in and rate increase for 2026 and water rate increase for 2026, electric rate increase for 2026, and you'd be surprised how much information is out there. Sometimes it's going to take a while because those have to go through Public Service Commission just trials and whatever they talk, you know, to the municipalities and the people in those areas and come up with less than the utility company usually asks for. But if you look at what's on the horizon in that regard, and then you look at some past ones, you know, if they asked for 15% increase, did they get 7%, you know, or they getting half of what they're asking for. And so if you see in 2026, they're asking for a 20% increase, but history shows they'll get half, then, you know, you might budget for a 10% increase in the coming year. And hopefully you hit it right. And that's worked out pretty well for us.
Great. In our last moment, yep. Tom, go on.
Yeah, sorry, Deborah. I'll jump in and echo what Tim is saying. I absolutely think that the getting online or using like the tools that are on the screen now, just this pocket guide or the prompt guide that's available. Use AI, use ChatGPT to do some searches. So it sticks with the theme of what Tim is saying, but use some of these more powerful resources and ask what's forecasted within an area. Because boy, I've grown accustomed to seeing the power of these tools in the last handful of months, and there's a lot of great information. You can you just gotta get better at the prompts, and you can download or just draw out some really helpful information.
That's great. And I think you can still see the QR codes on screen, so do a quick scan. As we close up shop for the day, I really want to thank our guests, Eric Reinhold, Tim Steinborn, Dylan Reedy, and Tom Diliberti for sharing their insights today, and the team at Energy Cap for making this webinar possible. We really appreciate it. Finally, as always, thanks to all our attendees for your participation today. Make sure you check out all those resources, and if we didn't get to your question, the team will follow up, and we will see you back here later in June for our next webinar in this series. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks.
Thank you.
Bye now.